Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Marissa for anybody who is new, and today I'm going to be covering 3 big categories that you should consider before becoming a plant parent. Now within these 3 categories there's a lot of subcategories, and as always I will have timestamps on either side as well as listed kind of more in detail down below. So go ahead and click on those if you have a certain part of this video that you are looking forward to, and it'll get you there a lot quicker. So the top 3 categories, and these are kind of like umbrella term categories that I wanted to use, is first the type of plant, second is your setup, and then the third category is just any kind of tools and things like that that you may need when you become a plant parent. If you were thinking, type of plant is a very broad category, it's because it is. So the type of plant that you choose is super important when you become a plant parent, because you need to understand what that plant needs, otherwise it will not be successful in your space. A few things within this category that you might want to consider is how much light does the plant need? So is it a plant that likes to be in a darker area, or is it a plant that needs really high light to survive? The next thing you should consider is humidity. So this is a big one because I feel like a lot of the plants on the market right now require a lot of humidity just because of where their origins are. These plants in nature will grow in those high humidity climates, and when you bring them into your home where naturally there isn't a lot of humidity, they suffer terribly. One example of this is my marantas and my calatheas. Now these are very simple versions of this. These plants love humidity, and you'll see in a lot of pictures or things like that where people can't give it enough and the edges start to brown and things like that, and the plant just overall isn't as healthy as it could be. So be sure you do your research on that. There are plants that don't require as high humidity, but if you want one of those plants, be sure you're acting accordingly and either getting a humidifier or being willing to see it slowly die. Okay, and the last kind of topic within the type of plant that I would consider is the watering. So this is when you kind of have to think about yourself as a plant parent and think, am I traveling a lot? Do I want to have to water every week? Do I want to be a very helicopter plant parent, and I'm going to be on that plant making sure that it's good and happy? Or am I going to be a plant parent that kind of steps back and just lets it do its thing, and I only have to worry about it every now and then? So watering can vary from plant to plant, and of course there are a lot of other variables when it comes to watering, but in general, when you go to buy a plant, you can kind of do some quick research and see what watering habits it prefers, if that's the best way to put it. So for example, cacti and succulents typically don't need to be watered that often, probably every maybe 2 to 3 weeks if they're in optimal conditions. And same for ZZ plants and snake plants. Now a lot of other plants like your peperomias, marantas, stramanthes, and things in those categories like to be a little bit more wet, since they prefer, again, humidity and those damper climates. So those plants would need to be tended to a little bit more frequently. Alrighty, so that concludes all of the things that I think you should consider before you pick out the type of plant you want to bring home. Ultimately, it'll save you time and money and frustration. Now, I want to do a little disclaimer. Research doesn't always save your plant. Sometimes the plant just isn't happy and it won't survive no matter what you do, but take it as a learning experience and you can always try again. Now we're going to move on to setup, and this has a lot of subcategories. So I'm going to be covering kind of the pots that you should be putting your plants in, and then general aesthetic setup that I do in my room. That was something I struggled with when I was a beginner plant owner, but I think I've got it down to a T, and it's something that works for me and is very realistic. So let's talk about setup first, since this is going to be the first thing that you want to do when you come home with a new plant. You're going to want to put it in its spot. So again, considering what the type of plant wants, so light, humidity, watering, things like that. So once you figure out a place, then you're going to want to know, well, what should I do now? So my biggest thing with setup is being sure that I have 3 key parts. I feel like that is the magic number of this video today. So the first key part is obviously the pot, which we'll get into in a second. The next thing is a saucer, some kind of saucer for the plant. And the third thing is a piece of cork to sit underneath that saucer, so that way I'm not ruining any of my surfaces. we're gonna kind of loop back and circle back to the type of pot. So I'm gonna kind of skip that for now because it's kind of a given. You need something to put your plant in. But let's talk about saucers. In my room, if you haven't seen my houseplant tour, check it out. It'll be linked up here in the cards. But for saucers, I have quite a few different things that I like to do. So my standard is a terracotta saucer, since that is mainly what comes when you buy a terracotta pot. And I love terracotta saucers. My only gripe with them is because terracotta is a porous material, the water that seeps down into the saucer will eventually seep into the bottom of the saucer and ruin your surfaces. So that takes me to the third part of my setup, and that is having a piece of cork underneath there. It does kind of help prevent scratching and things like that, but because the moisture from the terracotta saucer will touch that surface, eventually you will end up with like a mildewy, nasty ring that nobody wants. So the cork protects those surfaces from getting nasty, and the cork is very affordable. I typically get my cork from IKEA. In the cooking section, you can get packs of 2. You can also find their little cup holders in packs of 2 that are also cork, and they fit perfectly under a terracotta saucer. And then the last places that I usually look are Walmart, Lowe's, Home Depot, any big box store in their gardening section, because they typically sell them individually. Again, I think IKEA, if you can order them or go into a store and buy them, is the better alternative because they come in packs of 2 already and they're already cheap. But if you don't have an IKEA, or you don't want to order or can't order, run into a big box store and for sure you'll find some cork. Moving back to the topic of the saucer itself, so that's what I do if I'm using a terracotta saucer. Now, if I'm not using a terracotta, I am usually using a cover pot as a makeshift saucer, or I'm using a plastic saucer that is a little bit taller. Again, these you can buy at your big box store. So with my cover pots, what I like to do is have my plant in a separate pot, of course, with drainage, and then I will put this into the cover pot, and the cover pot will act as the saucer. Now, because most of my cover pots are glazed and they don't leak at all and they aren't porous, I don't have to worry about putting cork underneath them because none of the water is going to get through that material. However, you could put cork underneath them if they're on a surface that can be scratched easily. And then for the plastic pots, I use these on my plants that like to be bottom up watered, which if you want to see a video on that, I can totally do that. Then I'm able to just fill that plastic saucer and they're able to drink from there. And also because it's a little bit taller, I don't have to worry about my bigger plants overflowing the saucer and then leaking into whatever they are sitting on or whatever basket they're in. So that's about it for saucers. If you guys have any questions, leave them down below, but that's what I do, and it's just easy peasy. Now I'm gonna kind of talk about the pots. So I prefer terracotta. I think I got a question on this last week, but someone noted that pretty much all of my pots are terracotta, and that's just because I overall think it's just better for the plant. And that is kind of my own plant philosophy, if you want to call it. I think terracotta, again, with it being a very porous material, your roots are able to breathe. There's a lot of aeration going in and out of the pot, and it just keeps your plant happy. And also, if you're a heavy waterer, terracotta will kind of help prevent that because the water will get sucked out through the porous nature of the pot, and you won't have to worry about your roots rotting or anything like that. My only thing to note is if you are wanting to be a plant parent that doesn't have to worry about your plants as much, you might want to kind of steer clear of terracotta because you are going to have to water a little bit more frequently. Again, because the water is going to be wicked out quicker, you're going to have to replenish that water more. So that's it for the terracotta pot. Now there are 2 types of terracotta. I'm going to show you some examples. So there are your high fire pots, which are any pot that you can buy at a big box store, any of your standard looking terracotta pots. And then there are your low fired terracotta, and these are typically the pots that you find with the pretty decorations on them or the nice detailing and things like that. Now high fire I'm fine with, you'll have no problems with. The low fire, my only thing with these is after a few waterings you will find your pot is going to start disintegrating, and that's because this pot was not fired at as high of a temperature as obviously your high fire pots. And the reason they do this is because if they fire it at a high temperature, they are more likely to damage or crack the clay, and they don't want to ruin that pretty design. So With that being said, I typically steer towards my high fired pots. They aren't as pretty, but they do the job and save me a lot of hassle in the long run. After terracotta, there is another kind of genre of plant pots, which I'm sure you all can guess, and that is your ceramic or your glazed pots. And I don't really like to call them ceramic because technically terracotta is ceramic. It's just not glazed and pretty, and it has like a different color. But anyway, so I'm gonna call them glazed for the sake of this video. So your glazed pots are obviously the ones that have that pretty paint on the outside and ultimately takes away the porous nature of the pot. You can also find glazed pots with concrete. Typically they will leave the concrete looking material on the outside and then they will glaze the inside. So again, taking away the porous nature. These pots are great as cover pots, and if you're very careful with your watering, you can pot your plants directly into them. I would just steer clear of that though if you're a beginner, because it's very easy to overwater and not catch water sitting in the bottom, and then your plants will rot. So that's kind of everything with pots. Again, I prefer terracotta. I don't know why. I like the look of it. I think it's easy, and yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Oh, and before I forget, I know I'm going to get questions about nursery pots or plastic pots. I think those are fine too because they have a lot of holes in the bottom with a lot of drainage. However, long term, I don't think it's good to leave your plants in there. Of course, keep them in there until, you know, they're ready to be potted up or moved. But ultimately, again, I don't think that is the best option for your plants because, again, the sides are still not allowing a lot of airflow and things like that. You get the gist. But as always, you do you and put it in the pot you want to. That rhymed. Okay, we are moving into our last topic of today's video, and it is going to be some tools that you may find helpful if you are a beginner plant parent. So first thing you're gonna need is a watering can. Now, you don't have to have a watering can, it just makes it way easier. Why? Because it's very unrealistic to have to carry your plants back and forth every time. And if you're a beginner plant parent, you will probably accumulate plants pretty quickly. So your plant collection will probably go from 1 to maybe 10 or 50 within a matter of time, and you do not want to have to be lugging 50 plants back and forth to your sink. So invest in a good watering can that you like. I have a few different ones. I have ones that have, you know, the shower head on them, and then I also have the ones that are pretty skinny at the top. I prefer the skinnier ones for houseplants, but if you are an outdoor gardener, the shower head is great. The next thing that I recommend is a moisture meter. So I use a moisture meter when I'm checking some of my bigger plants because I don't like getting dirt under my nails. So I will take my moisture meter, stick it down, and kind of go as far down with your meter as the roots go, and then it'll kind of tell you. Now my meter is pretty cool. It has 3 settings. It has your moisture, obviously, your light, and then also your pH. So there are 2 probes on this one. I picked it up from Home Depot and I'll try to link it down below for you guys. But for beginner plant parents, I think these moisture meters are great because they will tell you for sure if your plant is wet or not. And if the reading is wet or even moist, I would just hold off on watering. So moisture meters are not always correct. They don't always give you a perfect reading, but it'll help you gauge a little bit better than just not feeling it at all and watering it and then killing your plant. The last thing that I have, which is kind of extra, is a syringe, and I use this to suck the water out of the saucers to keep it from overflowing and getting all over the place. So this one I actually got from a bar when we were doing syringe shots. That is very hard to say, syringe shots. And obviously I took the shot, and then I had this syringe, and for a long time I was like, I need to throw this away, but then I was like, oh wait, I can use that for my plants. And how many of you guys do that? You have something and you're like, I can't throw it away because I could use it for my plants. I'm totally like that. Now I typically use this when I'm going around watering and I see a saucer getting kind of full. I'll just go in, suck out the water, and either put it back in my watering can or just flush the water back through the plant again until I know that the plant is completely watered. I just love these syringes. They are convenient and they're nice, and it saves you time again from going back and forth from the sink, having to dump out the saucers as they fill up, or having to clean up after you water because your saucer's all overflowed. Now again, I got this from a bar, but I will try to find some from Amazon or anywhere I can find them, and I'll link them down below for you. Okay, so that concludes today's video. I hope some of this information helped you beginner plant owners. Again, this is not really anything new. There are plenty of videos out there kind of covering all this information, but I thought I'd do just a quick snippet and kind of make a hub for you guys so that way you guys don't have to go all over the place looking for this information. As always, I hope you enjoyed. Please subscribe and be sure you hit that notification bell. I will see you guys in my next video. Bye guys!